You ever think you've seen it all? Then life hands you a scene that's so bizarre, so perfectly ridiculous, you'd swear someone wrote it for TV? Yeah, that's what ran through my mind the afternoon I heard the sickening crunch of metal against steel out in my own cornfield, right in the middle of harvest, right when you're lulled by the slow heartbeat of the tractor, mind wandering to nothing but the steady rows. It jerked me straight out of my routine, and when I climbed down, boots hitting the dry earth, I saw her, Karen, the self-declared queen of the HOA, halfway out of her pearl-white SUV, finger pointed at me like she was picking a criminal from a lineup. Before I could open my mouth, she launched straight into performance mode, voice high and quivering. "You tried to kill me. You swerved at me. I'm calling 911. And I just stood there, covered in dust, too tired to even be angry. Because honestly, the only thing more absurd than swerving in a 50-year-old Massey Ferguson is believing someone would do it at 12 miles an hour. Unless you weren't paying attention, or, we're just so used to the world moving out of your way. That's always been Karen's problem. She doesn't see anyone but herself, and that day was no exception. But let me back up a second. This land, these rows, they're all that's left of what my family worked for decades. My dad's hands built these fences. My granddad's sweat is in this dirt. When Dad passed, my brother couldn't wait to sell off most of it. And next thing you know, a developer paved half the county and stuck up plastic street signs with names like Amberfield Court. Real cute, right? And with those shiny new driveways came the HOA, rising up like some medieval council, regulating mailbox colors and, apparently, now tractor traffic. But my property? It's the last patch of green they couldn't buy, and every single day I've worked to keep it just the way my dad left it, even if it means being the village eyesore. Karen, well, she took it personally. The day she moved in, it started with polite notes in my mailbox about community quiet hours, then official-looking warnings about dust, then phone calls to the county about imaginary emissions. And when none of that worked, it turned into shouting at the end of my driveway. Her, clutching her clipboard like it was a sheriff's badge, me just waving and wishing she'd get tired before I did. But ramming her SUV into my tractor? That was new. And the way she launched into her 911 performance, you'd think she'd spent her life training for a scene like this. "Ma'am, I was harvesting on my land," I said, trying to keep my voice as calm as an old dog in the sun, but Karen wasn't listening. She jabbed her finger, called me a trespasser, declared it HOA property, as if history could be rewritten just because she made copies of some bylaws. So here comes the sheriff, gravel popping under his tires, and out steps Deputy Randall, a local, someone who's known my family long enough to spot Karen's show for what it was. She ran up to him, clinging to his arm, putting on the full damsel in distress act, painting me as some rural Mad Max. I could almost see Randall weighing every word, his eyes flicking from my rusted tractor to her gleaming bumper, to the spot in the corn where only a fool would drive. "Ma'am, that machine couldn't swerve if it wanted to," he deadpanned, and for a second I thought Karen might actually faint. She tried every angle. "He's blocking the road. He's dangerous," he threatened me, but Randall wasn't buying it. He took notes, measured tire tracks, inspected my paperwork. When Karen pushed for me to be arrested, Randall just shook his head. "What I see here is property damage caused by your vehicle, ma'am. You want to press charges, you'll be the one paying." The look on Karen's face. I swear, if glares could kill, we'd be planting a tree in my honor right now. But I knew better than to think that was the end. Karen didn't back down. She regrouped. Next morning, there's a letter in my mailbox, bold font, HOA letterhead, threatening 5-figure fines if I didn't cease hazardous farming activity. Never mind that my land isn't even in their jurisdiction. Most folks would have been spitting mad. Me? I just poured another cup of coffee, waved at her when she drove past, and kept harvesting. That's when the real pettiness kicked off. Anonymous complaints to zoning, Facebook posts about dangerous dust clouds, orange cones mysteriously blocking my farm lane. I moved them each time, lined them up neat on her driveway, and kept smiling. But a week later, I got pulled over by Highway Patrol for reckless agricultural driving. No joke. They ran through their checks, found nothing wrong, and, before leaving, told me they'd gotten a complaint from someone in my neighborhood. It didn't take a genius. Word spread fast. My cousins sent laughing emojis. The co-op clerks made jokes. Even Randall called to say, "She's pushing her luck." The escalation wasn't about safety or peace or any kind of community good. It was about power, about making me bend. Then the mailbox incident. The one my dad built, smashed to pieces one night. The next morning, I saw the fresh scraped down Karen's SUV and just shook my head. So I replaced it with a cast iron beast, concrete base, the kind you could plow snow into all winter. She watched from her driveway, probably steaming, but I just waved and got back to work. Then came county code inspectors, supposedly tipped off about unsafe chemicals. They found nothing, of course, just a barn cleaner than most kitchens. Karen was burning through every resource she could, filing so many complaints the HOA started talking about kicking her off the board. Tom, one of the board members, even came by with a beer. "She's digging her own grave," he said, and I could see it, her grip slipping, but not gone. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. One night, my trail cameras caught Karen in her bathrobe, tiptoeing around my barn with a flashlight, snapping photos. Not drunk, not dazed, just obsessed, methodical, looking for anything she could weaponize. I started saving everything: photos, videos, texts, even the late-night HOA notices that showed up like clockwork. It wasn't about corn anymore. It was about winning, about never being the one who has to back down. Her next play was dangerous. A false 911 call, reporting an armed man making threats. I kept my hands visible, cooperated, and, after some awkward questions, the young deputy realized it was a bogus report. When Randall called, he was furious. That's a crime, not a nuisance. But all I could think was how lucky I was it didn't go worse. I'd seen men lose everything over less in places far from here. After that, the neighbors started catching on. Karen's stunts got bolder. Fake emergencies, flyers on every mailbox accusing me of being a menace, public HOA meetings where she'd whip up the crowd and call me the devil. But when I calmly rolled out the county map, deed in hand, and showed everyone the real property lines, it was like I'd flipped a switch. Eyes opened. Voices shifted. She sputtered about grandfather clauses, but the crowd was done following her lead. Her response? Another midnight mailbox attack, caught in high def by my cameras, SUV and all. Randall and my lawyer both agreed. Now she'd crossed the line into federal crimes. But did she stop? Not a chance. Next week, county inspectors showed up, again. More accusations, more wasted time, more evidence in my folder. The HOA board finally snapped, voting her out as president. But even then, Karen couldn't accept defeat. That's when she went public. News vans, reporters, all staged on the cul-de-sac like some reality TV intervention. She called me a terrorist on live TV, declared the whole neighborhood was living in fear. I just showed them footage of her prowling in the dark, mailbox smashing, false 911 calls. The story flipped overnight. Comments shredded her. Neighbors stopped hiding. The HOA board finally turned their backs. Her last gasp was a pile of lawsuit papers, thick and threatening, delivered by courier. My lawyer leafed through them, laughed, and filed our own: harassment, property damage, stalking, false reporting. The court date was packed. Neighbors, officials, all watching as the judge handed down a restraining order and fines heavy enough to finally break her streak. You know what I mean? Sometimes the only way to win a war is not to fight every battle, but to keep standing, gathering receipts, letting the other side dig their own pit. Karen's obsession, her refusal to let go, her need for control, those were the real weapons that finally took her down. Afterward, the neighborhood changed. The air felt lighter. Folks came by to apologize, offer help, bake pies. Karen moved out eventually, her house sitting on the market like a monument to her own downfall. Now, I sit on my porch some nights, bourbon in hand, the cornfield quiet again, and think about everything it took to outlast her. The lesson is simple. Fear only works as long as people believe it. When you stand your ground, keep your receipts, and let time do its work, even the worst storm blows itself out. But hey, maybe you disagree. Maybe you've lived through worse, or think the system's broken beyond repair. I want to know, was I right to play the long game? Or should I have pushed back harder, sooner? Tell me what you would have done. Share your stories, your thoughts on where the line is between standing up and fighting back. Because I know I'm not the only one who's had to stare down a Karen on their own land.